A heartless millionaire refuses to help a dying woman. What she leaves behind destroys his entire legacy. Ethan Pierce stood atop his skyscraper, looking down at the city below. He had built his empire on the backs of the weak, climbing his way to the top with a ruthless determination that left no room for compassion. As he surveyed the bustling streets, a sense of satisfaction washed over him. This was his kingdom, and he ruled it with an iron fist. His reverie was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. "Come in," he barked, his eyes never leaving the window. A timid secretary entered, her hands trembling as she held out a folder. "Mr. Pierce, there's a woman here to see you. She says it's urgent." Ethan sighed, finally turning to face the secretary. "Send her away. I don't have time for every desperate soul who comes begging at my door." The secretary hesitated, her eyes wide with fear. "She says her name is Margaret, sir. Margaret Hawkins." Ethan froze, a flicker of recognition passing over his face. Margaret Hawkins. The name stirred a distant memory, one he had long since buried. He waved his hand dismissively. "Fine. Send her in. But make it quick." Margaret Hawkins entered the office, her frail body seeming to shrink under the weight of Ethan's gaze. She was a ghost of the woman he had once known, her vibrant spirit dimmed by the ravages of time and illness. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know it's been a long time, but I need your help." Ethan leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "And why should I help you, Margaret? What have you ever done for me?" Margaret smiled sadly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I remember a time when you were different, Ethan. When you cared about more than just power and wealth. I remember the boy who used to play in my garden, the one who dreamed of making the world a better place." Ethan scoffed, his lip curling in disdain. "That boy is long gone, Margaret. He died the day he realized that the world doesn't care about dreams. It only cares about strength." Margaret shook her head, her voice growing stronger. "You're wrong, Ethan. The world needs more than just strength. It needs compassion and hope and love. That's why I'm here. I need your help to save something that matters more than any empire you could ever build." Ethan listened impatiently as Margaret explained her request. She spoke of a community garden, a small patch of green in the midst of the city's concrete jungle. It was a place where people from all walks of life came together to grow food, to share stories, and to find a sense of belonging. But now, the garden was in danger. A wealthy developer had set his sights on the land, eager to turn it into another soulless high-rise. Margaret and her daughter, Emily, had been fighting to save the garden, but they were running out of time. They needed money, and they needed it fast. Ethan listened, his face a mask of indifference. When Margaret finished, he leaned forward, his eyes cold and hard. "And why should I care about some little garden, Margaret? What's in it for me?" Margaret met his gaze unflinchingly, her voice steady. "Nothing, Ethan. There's nothing in it for you. But there's everything in it for the people who depend on that garden. It's a lifeline, a reminder that there's still beauty and goodness in this world. And if you can't see that, then I pity you." Ethan's jaw clenched, his hands tightening into fists. "Get out," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "Get out of my office, and don't ever come back." Margaret stood, her head held high. "I will, Ethan. But remember this, you have the power to make a difference, to be more than just a ruthless millionaire. You have the power to be a good man. I hope you find that power before it's too late." With that, she turned and walked out of the office, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan pushed the memory of Margaret's visit to the back of his mind. He had more important things to worry about, like crushing his competitors and expanding his empire. But then, one day, a letter arrived. It was from Margaret, written in her shaky hand. As Ethan read the words, his heart began to pound. "Ethan," the letter began, "by the time you read this, I will be gone. The cancer has finally won, and I am at peace. But before I go, there is something you must know. Many years ago, when you were just a boy, your mother worked for me. She was a kind and gentle soul, and she loved you more than anything in this world. But she was also very sick, and she knew that she wouldn't be around to see you grow up. So she made me promise, Ethan. She made me promise that I would watch over you, that I would be there for you when she couldn't be. And I have tried, in my own way, to keep that promise. I know that you have become a hard man, Ethan. I know that you have forgotten the boy you once were. But I still believe in that boy. I still believe in the goodness that lies within you. Please, Ethan. Don't let your mother's legacy die with me. Don't let the garden wither and fade. Be the man she always knew you could be. With love, Margaret. Ethan sat back in his chair, the letter clutched in his trembling hands. For the first time in years, he felt something stirring within him, a long-forgotten ember of compassion. Emily Hawkins stood before the community garden, her eyes fixed on the lush greenery that stretched out before her. It was hard to believe that this vibrant oasis had once been a barren lot, a forgotten corner of the city that no one cared about. But Emily had cared. She had poured her heart and soul into this garden, working tirelessly to transform it into a place of beauty and life. And now, with her mother gone, she was more determined than ever to keep that legacy alive. She turned to face the crowd that had gathered behind her, a sea of familiar faces that represented the heart and soul of this community. My friends, she began, her voice strong and clear, we have come together today to honor the memory of a remarkable woman. My mother, Margaret Hawkins, believed in the power of this garden to bring people together, to heal wounds and bridge divides. And she fought with every ounce of her being to protect it. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, and Emily felt a surge of emotion rising within her. But now, that fight falls to us. We cannot let her legacy die. We cannot let the forces of greed and corruption win. We must stand together, as one community, and show the world that love is stronger than hate, that hope is more powerful than fear. The crowd erupted into cheers, and Emily felt a sense of pride swelling within her. This was what her mother had always wanted, what she had worked so hard to achieve. A community united in purpose, bound together by the unbreakable bonds of love and compassion. Ethan stood at the window of his office, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon. The letter from Margaret lay on his desk, a silent reminder of the choice he now faced. For years, he had lived by a simple creed: power was everything, and compassion was weakness. He had built his empire on those principles, ruthlessly crushing anyone who stood in his way. But now, something had changed. The letter had awakened something within him, a long-dormant seed of humanity that refused to be ignored. He thought of Emily, of the fierce determination he had seen in her eyes as she fought to save the garden. He thought of the community that had rallied around her, of the love and support they had shown in the face of adversity. And he thought of his mother, of the promise he had made to her so many years ago. A promise to be a good man, to use his power for something more than just personal gain. Slowly, almost reluctantly, Ethan reached for his phone. He dialed a number he had never called before, his heart pounding in his chest. "Emily," he said when she answered, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "It's Ethan Pierce. I think it's time we talked." The meeting between Ethan and Emily was tense, the air thick with unspoken emotions. They sat across from each other in a small coffee shop, two people from different worlds, brought together by a shared connection. "I got your mother's letter," Ethan said, his eyes fixed on the table between them. "I'm sorry for your loss." Emily nodded, her gaze unwavering. "Thank you. But that's not why you called me here, is it?" Ethan hesitated, his fingers drumming nervously on the table. "No," he admitted. "It's not. I called you here because I want to help. With the garden, I mean." Emily's eyes widened in surprise, and Ethan hurried to explain. "I know I haven't been the most supportive in the past. I know I've been part of the problem. But reading your mother's letter, it made me realize some things. About myself, about the man I want to be." He looked up, meeting Emily's gaze directly. "I want to make things right, Emily. I want to help you save the garden. Not just with money, but with my time, my resources, my influence. I want to be part of something bigger than myself, something that matters." Emily sat back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "And why should I trust you, Ethan? Why should I believe that you've suddenly had a change of heart?" Ethan leaned forward, his voice low and intense. "Because I'm not doing this for me, Emily. I'm doing it for your mother. For the promise I made to her and to my own mother. I'm doing it because I believe in what you're fighting for, and I want to help you win." The news of Ethan's involvement in the garden spread like wildfire, sending shockwaves through the community. Some were skeptical, convinced that the ruthless millionaire had ulterior motives. Others saw it as a sign of hope, a glimmer of light in the darkness. But Emily knew the truth. She had seen the sincerity in Ethan's eyes, heard the conviction in his voice. And she had made the decision to trust him, to give him a chance to prove himself. Together, they worked tirelessly to save the garden. Ethan used his connections to rally support from local businesses and politicians, while Emily mobilized the community to take action. They organized fundraisers and volunteer days, bringing people together in a common cause. And slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. The developer who had once seemed invincible suddenly found himself on the defensive, his plans unraveling in the face of public outcry. But it wasn't just about winning the battle. As Ethan spent more time in the garden, working side by side with the people he had once dismissed as beneath him, something began to change within him. He felt a sense of connection, of belonging, that he had never experienced before. He saw the way the garden brought people together, how it fostered a sense of community and purpose. And he realized that this was what he had been missing all along, the thing that had always eluded him in his pursuit of power and wealth. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt truly alive. And he knew that he would do whatever it took to protect this precious oasis, to ensure that it would always be a place of hope and healing for generations to come. As the battle for the garden reached its climax, Ethan found himself facing a new challenge. His business partners, the same people who had once celebrated his ruthless tactics, were now turning against him. They saw his involvement in the garden as a weakness, a sign that he had gone soft. And they were determined to bring him down, to seize control of his empire and restore the old order. But Ethan was not the same man he had once been. The garden had changed him, had awakened a strength and resilience he had never known he possessed. He stood before his board of directors, his eyes blazing with a new kind of fire. "I know what you're thinking," he said, his voice steady and clear. "You think I've lost my edge, that I've gone soft. But you're wrong." He leaned forward, his gaze sweeping the room. "I've found something more valuable than any empire, more precious than any fortune. I've found a purpose, a reason to fight for something bigger than myself." He took a deep breath, his voice growing stronger with every word. "And I will not let you take that away from me. I will not let you destroy the garden, or the community that depends on it. I will fight you with every ounce of strength I possess, and I will win." There was a moment of stunned silence, and then the room erupted into chaos. But Ethan stood firm, his resolve unshakable. He knew that the battle was far from over, that there would be more challenges to come. But he also knew that he was not alone, that he had the support of a community that believed in him, that had faith in the power of compassion and hope. And with that knowledge, he knew that anything was possible. As the dust settled, Ethan and Emily stood together in the heart of the garden, surveying the fruits of their labor. The once neglected lot had been transformed into a lush paradise, bursting with life and color. But it was more than just a physical transformation. The garden had become a symbol of something deeper, a testament to the power of community and the resilience of the human spirit. Ethan felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to see Emily smiling at him, her eyes shining with pride. "We did it," she said softly. "We saved the garden." Ethan nodded, his own eyes misty with emotion. "No," he said. "You did it, Emily. You and your mother, and all the people who believed in this place. I was just lucky enough to be a part of it." Emily shook her head, her smile widening. "Don't sell yourself short, Ethan. You played a bigger role than you know. You showed people that change is possible, that even the most unlikely of allies can make a difference. Ethan felt a surge of gratitude, a sense of belonging that he had never experienced before. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "For giving me a chance, for believing in me." Emily squeezed his shoulder, her touch warm and comforting. "That's what community is all about, Ethan. It's about lifting each other up, about being there for each other when it matters most." Ethan nodded, his heart full to bursting. He knew that there would be more challenges ahead, more battles to fight. But he also knew that he would never face them alone, that he had found a family in this garden, a sense of purpose that would guide him for the rest of his days. And as he looked out over the vibrant landscape before him, he knew that he had finally found his true path, his way back to the man he had always been meant to be. The news of Ethan's transformation spread quickly, inspiring others to follow in his footsteps. People from all walks of life began to flock to the garden, drawn by the promise of connection and purpose. But not everyone was happy with the changes. The developer who had once sought to destroy the garden was now more determined than ever to see it fall, and he was willing to go to any lengths to make it happen. Ethan knew that he would have to be vigilant, that he would have to use every resource at his disposal to protect the garden and the community that depended on it. He called a meeting of his allies, a diverse group of individuals who had come together in support of the garden. There were business owners and community leaders, activists and artists, all united by a common purpose. "We have come so far," Ethan said, his voice ringing with conviction. "But the fight is not over yet. There are still those who would seek to destroy what we have built, who would put their own greed and ambition above the needs of the community." He looked around the room, his gaze settling on each face in turn. "But we will not let them win. We will stand together, as one community, and we will fight for what we believe in." There was a murmur of agreement, a sense of solidarity that filled the room. And Ethan knew that, whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The final battle for the garden was a brutal one, a clash of wills and ideologies that threatened to tear the community apart. The developer had rallied his own supporters, a group of individuals who saw the garden as a threat to their own interests. They came with bulldozers and cranes, with legal documents and political clout. And for a moment, it seemed as though all was lost, that the garden would be destroyed once and for all. But Ethan and his allies refused to give up. They stood their ground, linking arms in a human chain that stretched across the entrance to the garden. They sang songs of protest and hope, their voices rising above the din of the machines. And slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. The media began to take notice, shining a spotlight on the struggle for the garden. Politicians began to speak out in support of the community, recognizing the power of their collective voice. And then, in a moment that would go down in history, the developer backed down. Faced with insurmountable opposition, he announced that he would be withdrawing his plans to develop the land, that he would be leaving the garden in the hands of the community. The cheer that went up from the crowd was deafening, a roar of joy and triumph that echoed through the streets. And Ethan felt a sense of pride and gratitude that he had never known before, a sense of belonging that filled his heart to overflowing. He knew that this was just the beginning, that there would be more challenges to come. But he also knew that they had proved something today, that they had shown the world the true power of community and compassion. In the days and weeks that followed, the garden flourished like never before. People came from far and wide to experience its beauty and serenity, to be a part of something greater than themselves. Ethan found himself at the center of it all, a leader and a visionary who had helped to make it all possible. But he knew that he was just one part of a greater whole, that the true strength of the garden lay in the people who had fought so hard to protect it. He walked through the garden one day, marveling at the abundance of life that surrounded him. The air was sweet with the scent of flowers and the sound of laughter, and everywhere he looked, he saw signs of hope and renewal. As he rounded a corner, he came face to face with Emily, who was kneeling in the dirt, tending to a bed of vegetables. She looked up at him, her face streaked with sweat and soil, and smiled. "Look at what we've done, Ethan," she said, gesturing to the garden around them. "Look at what we've created." Ethan nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "It's beautiful," he said. "But it's more than that. It's a testament to the human spirit, to the power of love and compassion." Emily stood up, brushing the dirt from her hands. "And it's just the beginning," she said. "Imagine what we could do if we applied this same spirit to other challenges, to other communities in need." Ethan felt a flicker of excitement, a sense of possibility that he had never experienced before. "I think you're right," he said. "I think this is just the start of something much bigger." Years passed, and the garden continued to thrive. It became a model for other communities around the world, a shining example of what was possible when people came together in the spirit of love and cooperation. Ethan and Emily remained at the heart of it all, leaders and visionaries who never lost sight of what truly mattered. They faced many more challenges over the years, but they always emerged stronger, more united than ever before. And as Ethan looked back on his life, he knew that everything had been leading up to this moment, to this place of purpose and belonging. He thought of his mother, of the promise he had made to her so many years ago. And he knew that she would be proud of the man he had become, of the legacy he had helped to create. He thought of Margaret, of the sacrifice she had made to protect the garden and the community that she loved. And he knew that her spirit lived on in every flower, every laugh, every act of kindness that bloomed in this precious oasis. And he thought of himself, of the journey he had taken from ruthless millionaire to compassionate leader. And he knew that he had finally found his true path, his way back to the man he had always been meant to be. As he stood in the heart of the garden, surrounded by the people he loved, Ethan felt a sense of peace and contentment that he had never known before. And he knew that, whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them with courage and hope, secure in the knowledge that he was part of something greater than himself, something that would endure for generations to come.